once weighed 325 pounds. Then she ended what is called the abusive relationship that caused her to be morbidly obese. What was it? And why is it being blamed for a killer epidemic that's sweeping across America? Laurie Johnson has the answer.
Like millions of Americans, Molly Carmel spent years trying different diets without ever seeing true success. At one point, she tipped the scale at 325 pounds.
I had to get into the shower sideways. You know, I stopped wearing underwear completely because back in those days, I didn't know where to buy underwear that would fit me. Like I stopped wearing shoes that tied because I couldn't tie my shoes, and it was as dark, and I couldn't stop eating.
In an act of desperation, Molly underwent bariatric surgery, but even that didn't stick.
The only thing worse than being morbidly obese is gaining weight back after being morbidly obese.
Life completely changed for Molly as she read studies on mice addicted to sugar. She learned consuming the sugar releases dopamine into the brain and how that feel-good chemical triggers memory, desire, and behavior. The research really clicked when Molly saw how giving into cravings meant it would take even more sugar to achieve the same level of pleasure.
Reading research that really it described me. I was like, oh.
Knowing processed flour affects the body just like sugar, Molly determined many of her diets failed because they allowed some flour and sugar consumption.
You know, they are big into moderation, which I think is I think it's impossible for so many of us. Let me tell you something. If I could moderate, that's what I would do.
For the first time in her life, she decided to give up sugar and flour for 3 days.
And when I started to have the detox, I was like, uh-oh.
But she pushed through.
I decided to continue on for like 3 more days.
Okay.
About day 57, I thought, I can do this.
She lost the weight and kept it off.
I mean, I haven't had sugar or flour in 10 years.
Now Molly helps others at her Manhattan weight loss clinic and in her book, Breaking Up with Sugar, in which she compares the addiction to a bad relationship.
I mean, think about an abuser. It's like, oh, you think you can get on without me, huh? You're a nothing. You're a nobody, right? And if you're an outside perspective, if you're watching that movie, you're like, get out of there, girl. You're fine. You're amazing.
Ditching sugar and flour involves the big ticket items like cake and cookies, but also lots of processed foods you might not expect.
Sugar is a tricky, tricky, tricky little abuser because it really is everywhere. I gave up ketchup. I gave up teriyaki sauce. I gave up a lot of salad dressings. I had to start to read ingredients.
If sugar or one of its many aliases is in one of the first 4 ingredients, just say no. Molly says after a while, it becomes easier.
I travel and I go out to dinner and I order in and I live a big, abundant life.
The hardest part is enduring the headaches, depression, and other withdrawal effects that can last for days or weeks.
It's a real thing, and it passes. You want to know the way it passes, though? So if we don't go back to the sugar.
So while not everyone feels controlled by sugar, Molly Carmel believes many do.
I think there's a part of our country that is so deeply giving up on themselves and is so deeply hopeless.
And says if she can kick the habit, anyone can.
Gosh, I just wish people would look at their...
Laurie Johnson is here to tell us about the sugar addiction. Sugar's in everything, isn't it?
It really is in the processed foods and food manufacture. This is not a coincidence.
Yeah.
They put it in there, they sneak it in there because they know it is addictive. You're going to eat more and buy more.
Well, certainly ketchup is loaded with it.
Right.
What else is?
So many things. Sugar is found in processed form, in processed foods in 60 different ways. There are 60 different names for sugar. And if you want to know all the names, they are in this book, Breaking Up with Sugar. Many of them end in ose, O-S-E, dextrose, maltose, fructose. Also, look out for the word syrup, all the different syrups. That's sugar. And even natural things like honey and agave, that's sugar.
I've been concerned about high fructose corn syrup, which I think has a different chemical than just plain old sugar. Have you found something about that?
It is true. It is, your body does metabolize it differently.
Yes.
Many doctors say it has a more serious effect on your body than regular sugar, and it can lead to fatty liver disease, this is the fatty liver disease is what a lot of alcoholics have, but now people who eat a lot of high fructose corn syrup get the fatty liver disease too. So it's processed in your liver in a detrimental way. But it's not just high fructose corn syrup, because now the manufacturers are like, ooh, people are afraid of high fructose corn syrup, so let's just call it corn syrup instead, or let's call it something else. So they end up getting the sugar in there.
You say fructose, what is
Maltose,
that?
dextrose, all the different syrups. There are all kinds of, but there are 60 different aliases for sugar. And again, they're all in here, but look out for OSE and syrup.
Well, white bread metabolizes this sugar, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because in the grinding process, so we're talking about flour, not whole grains. For example, you eat oatmeal every morning. Oats are fine because those are the whole grains, but when you grind up grains, all the good stuff is taken out, and what's left is starch. And starch is just like sugar in your body. So again, when you're reading the labels of processed food, if you see the word starch, tapioca starch, potato starch, corn starch, that's flour.
It's all in there.
Yeah, so look out for the word flour, and then all those, and then flour has a bunch of aliases too.
You remember when they had something called cyclamates, and they banned that because they had one rat someplace that got some cancer. But they opened up the door to something called equal, which I think is really bad.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because artificial sweeteners are just as bad as sugar, if not worse. And we've talked about this before, about the detrimental effect artificial sweeteners have on your gut. Sugar is bad for your gut. Artificial sweeteners are even worse. Plus, they put that taste of sugar in your mind. And this is so much, an addiction to sugar is so much about what's going on in your mind and the dopamine and your desire for more. And so artificial sweeteners do that too. So you have to really stop eating those too.
Well, you know, we talked about the better gut, that in your gut, if you have the wrong kind of little critters down there, that it'll demand more of this. So isn't that addiction sort of working together?
Exactly. Yes, it is. And I love how you do this, because it's all combined. Yes. And so many of the things that we talk about for building a better gut are the same thing with sugar. So many people have failed on their diets before, because these diets will allow for a little bit of sugar or a little bit of flour. You know, you see these frozen meals, they've got the sauces, they're all sugar, but just a little bit. And people who are addicted to sugar can't have just a little. They don't do moderation. So a little leads to a lot. And so it's better to just go cold turkey. It
starts with a little baby. You think, I like a sweet something, so the little baby wants sweet. So we put salt and sugar into all these cereals and all these things for these babies, and they get fat from the get-go.
It's true. And, you know, a lot of these parents have the best intentions. And so knowledge is power, and understanding. That's what's so great about this, is understanding what sugar and processed flour do to our brains and our bodies. That is the first step, and we need to understand they're very, very unhealthy. We're trying to bless people by making them chocolate chip cookies. You know, our kids come home and we give them cookies and milk. But actually, if we understand what that's doing to our children, it's very bad.
Well, again, back to this gut thing. Most of these artificial sweeteners will destroy the gut flora.
Terrible. Yes, they're absolutely awful. They cause bad bacteria to grow, and they inhibit the good bacteria from growing. So artificial sweeteners, actually studies have shown that people who eat and drink a lot of artificial sweeteners gain more weight.
Yeah. Well, Lori, I tell you, it's groundbreaking. This book is called Breaking Up. Now, this woman had bariatric surgery.
Yes.
What else did she really went through an agony.
She did every diet under the sun, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers are like, yeah, me too. So she finally just gave up. She even had bariatric surgery and then gained the weight back. So then she saw that there is such a thing as a sugar addiction. And that's what this is all about. And more medical doctors and people who are health experts are embracing this idea of a sugar addiction and treating it as you would treat any other addiction, which means, number one, don't have any, but number two, if you do have some, don't completely give up and binge. Don't go on a bender like if you're an alcoholic. So get back on the wagon.
What do we eat?
Well, you eat anything. You can have, like I said, the whole grains, the quinoa, Ezekiel bread. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
All the time.
Good. Well, that's good because it has no flour and it has the whole grain. So whole grains are fine, the quinoa and the oats. And then you can still have sugar. I mean, you can still have fructose, which is the natural sugar in fruits, as long as you're eating the whole fruit, no juices. If you combine the sugar with fiber, then it's okay, because what happens is the sugar is slowly digested rather than making it have that giant insulin spike.
This woman actually had headaches when she gave up sugar?
Thank you for bringing that up. That's detox, that's withdrawal. And a lot of people throw in the towel when they start going through the detox and withdrawal. If you're addicted to something, when you give it up, it's gonna hurt. But push through. A lot of people are like, oh, it really bothers me giving up sugar, so I'm going to go back to it. If you push through the pain, just know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. One day, soon, you will stop craving it. That's the hope. That's the goal. It does happen. You'll stop craving the sugar if you go without it.
Wow. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the book is called Breaking Up with Sugar. That was that was the abusive boyfriend.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I broke up with it, and I told him to go away.
We are never getting back together.
Well, thanks, Lori.